Counselor Amanda Chavez.
Here.
Here. Counselor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth
Here.
and Chairman Rivera.
Here. And I'd like to welcome Councilwoman Villarreal to Public Works. Next is approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Yes, Chair, one change. We would like to have item 5B before item 5A. So just a reordering of those two.
5B before 5A.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Anything from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Motion to approve is amended. Second.
Motion for approval is amended. With a second, any further discussion? See none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See none, motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff?
No changes from staff, Chair.
Was anything pulled?
Yes, item AD was pulled by Councilors Michael Garcia and Lee Garcia.
AD?
Correct. There's more than 26 items, so it's item A is in alpha, D is in dog.
Good, thank you. Anything else from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Move to approve is amended. Second.
A motion for approval is amended with a second. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? See none. Motion carries. On to presentation informational items. We'll go to 5B and then come back to 5A.
And thank you so much, Chairman, members of the committee. We wanted to give you an update on the Arroyo de los Chamisos Crossing project. We had completed some months ago the conceptual design phase, and we actually took a step back based on an important agency stakeholder, MPO, asked us to take a look at a couple other features that might really improve the traffic calming performance of the roadway and the safety for pedestrians and bicycles. And so we did that. This is our consultant project team. And we took a step back and we have incorporated quite a number of features that will really contribute to slower speeds and safety for all modes. So we wanted to give you that update before we move towards 30% design. NMDOT has funded us to move to 30% design. And so that's kind of the process we're in right now. And the consultant team will give you more details.
Thank you. And I just noticed Councilwoman Cassett on the screen, so I wanted to welcome her to Public Works and Utilities as well. Very good. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Chairman, councilors, members of the committee. Regina, thank you for inviting us to present at this meeting regarding the Arroyo de los Chamisos Crossing project. As most of you know, this project has been under development for about 3.5 years with this contract. But the corridor, it's been on the city's long-range transportation planning discussions for several decades. My name is Albert Thomas. Let me go to the next one. My name's Albert Thomas. I'm a senior vice president at Bohannon Houston, and I am on this team assisting Jim Hyman with the traffic and transportation engineering. Jim Hyman is with WSP and is the project manager for our consultant team. And on Zoom call with us, we also have Denise Ayton, who is our transportation planner and public involvement specialist for the project team. We've been working very closely with the City of Santa Fe staff, including the Public Works Director, Regina Willer, and the city's project manager, Leroy Pacheco. Today, we're going to give you a project update, as Regina mentioned. This presentation will provide you the update of the project status, the proposed improvements, which include traffic calming and multimodal design features, as well as an update on the stakeholder input that we received over the time that we've been working on this project, and talk about right-of-way considerations that will need to be taken into consideration during the next stages. Project is following the NMDOT location study procedures. The graphic on the right here shows the flow chart of that project development process. We've completed Phase A and Phase B, which are the study phases. The initial evaluation of alternatives and detailed evaluation of alternative studies began in July of 2019, and it took about 3.5 years to complete, with the cost just under $500,000, as you can see on the left. As Regina mentioned, we recently are starting on the contract for the next steps, which is Phase C, the environmental investigation of alternatives and documentation of the environmental process, and Phase D, which is the preliminary design. The project received funding of about $1 million for these next phases for the project development process, and we expect to be able to complete these by the end of the year. This map shows a project area which extends from Rodeo Road on the south to Cerrillos Road on the north. This project will provide a new connection in the city's transportation network that's going to provide mobility and circulation, with the primary objective of providing more direct route for traffic that will reduce the traffic that's currently cutting through neighborhoods and use this road instead of some of the residential roads that they use to get to their destination. This exhibit is from our Phase A study, and it shows the redistribution of traffic once this connection is made. This came from the City of MPO's travel demand model. The red lines show the decrease in traffic on local roads that will benefit from having this new connection. The new connection itself, which is in the center there, shown in green with a yellow highlight, is expected to carry about 10,000 vehicles per day based on the MPO's travel demand model for 20 years. Because there are residential homes along the existing portion of Richards Road, the study team has identified traffic calming features that can be designed with this new connection to help mitigate concerns that we heard during the public involvement and public outreach efforts. They include looking at a curvilinear roadway alignment, especially the area between Arroyo de los Chimizos and Arroyo de los Pinos, trying to create some curvature so that traffic knows that they're on a low-speed road. We're also looking at the implementation of roundabouts, one at the north, just north of the Arroyo, one just south. I'll talk about those in a little bit. And then a 10-foot striped travel lane with bike lanes and sidewalks. There'll be a raised median, which will help for improving pedestrian safety. And we're looking at raised crosswalks at some of the major crossing locations. The posted speed is going to be 30 miles per hour. And again, the idea is to maintain traffic calming features within the existing segment that's north of the Arroyo. This is a conceptual layout of the roundabout that we're looking at just south of the Arroyo. This allows connectivity and access to the adjacent properties. It also promotes traffic calming, causing reduced speeds, but it allows for free flow traffic to go through the intersection to help discourage cut-through traffic in the neighborhood streets. This design will require some right-of-way acquisition from the Rodeo de Santa Fe property. This roundabout is a proposed roundabout that we're looking at north of the Arroyo, just south of the Siringo Road area. This design feature creates a gateway for the existing residential community to let travelers know that they're entering this established neighborhood area. And it again will be a traffic calming device to help control speeds. As I mentioned previously, the project will be using narrower lanes to help encourage traffic calming along the corridor. Here's a typical section that we're looking at that we developed after getting input from the public and from some of our key project stakeholders like the MPO. The travel lanes will be 10-foot wide, separated by a raised median, and it will include on-street bike lanes that are separated from the motorized vehicles with a buffer. Pedestrians will have their own pathways on the outside of the curb and gutter, again, creating separation from the motorized traffic, which will help enhance their comfort levels for walking along this corridor. The project will include connectivity for pedestrian connectivity all the way from Cerrillos Road down to Rodeo Road. And this will comply with the ADA and ProWag design guidelines. There will be raised crosswalks and multiple locations along the corridor, again, to provide safe connectivity for the pedestrians crossing. And as I mentioned, on-street bike lanes. The project will also include connectivity to the existing Arroyo de los Chamisos Trail. We'll be including an at-grade crossing for the trail that will cross at street level, and we'll investigate the feasibility of also including a grade-separated trail crossing at that location. We do know there are some utilities in that area, and we'll be looking at those to see if there's any conflicts that would occur with us creating a grade-separated box to go under at that location. Some of the next rounds of public outreach activities are shown here on this slide. Although all the property owners have had the opportunity to participate in the public meetings that we've held so far, we'd also like to give them the opportunity to meet with us one-on-one for us to get a better understanding of what their concerns are, but also for us to display to them what the design means to their individual properties. So we intend to have interviews with any property owner that wishes that has property adjacent to that new corridor. In addition, we'll have 2 more public meetings, one during Phase C as part of the environmental investigation process, and one during Phase D, which is the preliminary design process. At the end of this next phase of our contract, we will have another status report meeting that comes to this committee. In this next phase of the project, there will also include right-of-way. The acquisition is expected from the Rodeo de Santa Fe property that I mentioned earlier, and also from Game and Fish properties. This will occur once the design footprint is established and that we know exactly how much property is going to be needed to implement this new corridor. From Siringo north, we'll be keeping the proposed improvements within the existing curb lines, and we don't expect to need right-of-way in that area. However, we will be identifying any private facilities that currently are encroaching within the existing public rights-of-way. Since the city is likely going to apply for federal funding for the construction of this corridor, it's important that these encroachments be mitigated before federal funds can be used on the construction of this project. This is a quick overview of the next steps. As I mentioned, we finished Phase A and Phase B studies. We expect to be done with Phase C and Phase D services by the end of the year. After that, the next steps are the final design and right-of-way acquisition, and then on to construction. Estimated costs at this time are $1 million for a final design, $1 million for right-of-way acquisition, and $20 million for construction. These costs will be refined as we complete our preliminary design to give you better updates before we apply for the next source of funding. With that, Jim and I and Leroy stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any questions for Mr. Thomas regarding the presentation? Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for being here with us today. Just quick clarifying question. And this was on slide. I apologize. I think slide 12. And you mentioned Phase D, June 2023, but Phase C is August 2023 as well. So is that supposed to be 2024 or?
Right now, those 2 phases are going to be going simultaneously. And the intent is that we want to have the public meeting that's part of our preliminary design earlier than the environmental. The reason for that is we want to use that public meeting to help us shape the footprint of this project. Once we get the footprint established, that's when the environmental will determine if there's any potential impacts. So we want to have the Phase C public involvement meeting after the Phase D public involvement meeting.
Okay. And is that typical? Just, I mean, out of curiosity, given the way it's lettered, so to speak, you would think C comes before D. In this case, we're putting D before C.
There are some projects where we do have phase C goes and then we start with phase D. But because this has got existing issues involved with it, and we've already done a lot of homework on it, we're going to run phase C and phase D concurrently. But as I said, we want to get the public information meeting for the preliminary design concept through the public eyes and get their feedback. That'll help us shape what we need to do for actually requesting an environmental clearance.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next question might be for Director Wheeler. Given that we rescinded the offer for the property from Game and Fish, do you know if they've put it back on the market? And if they have, do we intend to put in a new offer, or we've just said we're not going to further move forward looking at trying to purchase the property? We'll just move forward with I'm sorry, but I can't remember what you classified it as, eminent domain. Is that going to be the strategy moving forward? Are we going to look at potentially purchasing the property as we intended in the past?
Thank you so much, Chairman, Councilor Michael Garcia, for that question. The normal process is that as Mr. Thomas mentioned, that we get to the point in our design where we're extremely clear about exactly what land we need to construct our project. And at that point, we work with property owners to make them offers that are that match the market value of the property that we'd like to acquire. And so that's really our first step, is we make a market price value to offer, and then we invite the property owners to negotiate with us if they have issues or questions or additional needs. And so we go through quite a long negotiation process, and it's extremely rare for us to actually have to close on use eminent domain to acquire the property. And even in those cases, we still pay market value for the property. So I don't know if Game and Fish has put the land on the market, and it wouldn't be part of this project to pursue purchasing that whole piece anymore. That would be up to the governing body if you wanted to pursue that. But this project feels confident that we can use our normal right-of-way acquisition mechanisms when the time comes, which would be in approximately a year.
Okay.
And the other great thing about that is that we will be, as Mr. Thomas said, seeking federal. DOT has been funding the project till now. We may go for one more round of funding with DOT for the rest of the design, but they can also pay for right-of-way acquisition for the project as well. So we may be able to leverage outside funding for that right-of-way acquisition.
Okay, thank you for that update. If the property comes back on the market, would you mind just keeping our committee apprised? Because I think it was a great opportunity for us to have the land for the intention of the road, but also additional purposes. I know we were exploring housing, other services, and I think if we can move in that direction, I'd be open to exploring what opportunities might be there. So
thank you, Chairman and Councilor Michael Garcia. I'll let the asset development team know that you'd like to keep on the lookout for that.
Okay, thank you. No other questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas.
Anyone else from the committee? Yeah, anyone from the committee first, and then we'll go to Councilwoman Cassett and Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Thomas. And just a comment more than anything, I kind of really like to see the effort, the big effort of providing traffic calming in the area. I mean, doing it the first time and doing it right is going to be so important for this, because after the fact, trying to go back in there and reconstruct and put roundabouts and not identifying where the problem areas are beforehand, definitely. And so I just kind of wanted to make that comment in regards to the design and really identifying where the foot travel is going to be, and for the people who live in that neighborhood currently, I think that's a really big, important step to it all. So I do appreciate the presentation, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Councilwoman Cassett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me pop into the committee today. I really just wanted to recognize Director Wheeler and Libre Pacheco and the entire team for this process. I know that I had provided some feedback. There was some information from MPO, and also really listening to some of the constituent concerns. And that there has been a reshaping of the design of the proposed design of this crossing. And I just really want to recognize that work. Sorry, I have a loud child in the background. I really want to recognize that work, and I really want to recognize the change in process. However, my turn. The change in process that occurred. So thank you all so much. I know that my constituents really do appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And as Councilor Lee Garcia mentioned, just that focus on overall safety and multimodal access, as well as traffic calming ahead of the game, as opposed to what we frequently see, which is having to go back. So I just wanted to make sure that I was able to recognize you, and that is all. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cassett. Anybody else? I did have just one question and then a concern about, you mentioned ADA and then you said PROAG. What does PROAG stand for?
That is the confinements within the public rights of way. So it's a public rights of way access guideline.
Okay, thank you for that. And then along with the safety concerns, I think there's going to be a number of, and I'm sure you guys are looking at this or will look at it, but it's a concern of mine right now is vehicles backing out of their driveways onto the new road with the addition of 10,000 vehicles per day seems pretty significant. So I'm sure you'll take a look at that, and if you already haven't, and I don't know if it'll be a concern with the number of vehicles going through.
Chairman and committee members, yeah, that is one thing that was very apparent as we started looking at this project 3 years ago. There's a lot of homes that actually front onto that existing piece of property or onto that existing piece of the corridor. So we need to look at is how each one of those properties access, whether they have multiple access points or not, whether they have circular drives or just straight drives. But there, if you look at that existing street section now, it's pretty wide. And so the idea is, how do we maybe repurpose that existing paved area between the curbs, narrow up the travel lanes, provide the bicycle pedestrians, but also provide some sort of a buffer type for those people that are backing out and have some visibility to that oncoming traffic, so that they have the opportunities to get in and out of their properties.
Great. I'm glad you're already looking at that and already thinking about that. So appreciate that. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Pacheco, thank you. All right, let's move on. We're on to now item 5A.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our new Public Utilities Department Director, John Dupuy, to the committee as I step out of my very brief acting role and John steps into his new role. We are very excited for a productive and long term with Mr. Dupuy as the head of our department.
Thank you. Mr. Dupuy, would you like to say anything or tell us a little bit about yourself?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to say something. And I'm really new walking in, still trying to get my email and laptop and, all those normal things. But very excited about the team that's available and working with them to learn and help them do what they do already.
Great, thank you. And a little bit about your background.
My background is largely in utilities. I spent a little time working in water rights at the state engineer's office. It was kind of my introduction to Mexico, and it ended up being very fruitful, helping me understand a lot of the culture. And similarly, we have same type of concerns and mindset in Louisiana where I grew up. So there's a lot of connected understanding, and it helps me relate. And I look forward to helping the community however I can.
Great, thank you and welcome. Any questions for Mr. Dupuy? Hope I'm saying your name right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, welcome aboard. And as you get acclimated, we'll start giving you more and more work to do. We'll take it easy for now, though. Thank you. We're on to our consent agenda. Item AD was pulled by Councilor Michael Garcia and Councilor Lee Garcia as well. Councilor Lee Garcia, would You go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just pulled this item primarily because there's just a lot of gun legislation that I could get behind. I think that all of it packaged into one just doesn't allow me to support. However, I think within the resolution, the word assault rifle is, where we at? Including a ban on the sale of assault weapons. I think that's pretty vague without having a specific definition. And so I just kind of, I know it's a resolution to support legislation at the Roundhouse. I know there's a lot of stuff going on right now that's continuing on and some that is slowing down. And I just kind of wanted to know what our take is on an assault weapon. And as far as the definition, if you could elaborate on that. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councilors, Councilor Garcia. Thank you for the question. Before I start, I just want to say a quick thank you to Jesse Roach, who didn't blink and stood up and took over as acting director for the department and really did an extraordinary job with thoughtful leadership, was smart, low to no drama, and just kept things moving. And so Director Roach, I'm grateful for you for doing that. And we're very excited to have our new director, John Dupuy, start here as well. And we'll have that email and computer any day now. I actually just signed at 4:58, I signed the form to give you access to all those things. So there you go. Back to the matter at hand. Councilor Garcia, a definition isn't included in the bill in part because the definition wasn't included in the governor's remarks when she spoke at her inaugural address. I think if we wanted to, and I can do this before tomorrow night, I'm willing to bet that there is language within the bill that's been introduced at the legislature that provides a definition, and we can get that for you tomorrow night. Or before tomorrow, what's today? Before Wednesday night. Thank you. Yep.
I appreciate that. And I think that that is something that is very important to identify, especially when you have many people who currently have rifles that could be considered assault weapons. And I think that's one of the areas for me that many people that are already law-abiding citizens definitely be caught on being in trouble with something like this. And so that was my main question. Without a definition going forward, I think that it is something that how do we identify this? How does it hold up in the court of law when somebody is charged with a felony conviction of having an assault weapon, and that could be a 30-06 that somebody has as a hunting rifle. It's a repeating arm, but it doesn't look anything like what is being portrayed definitely in the media. And so I appreciate the response, and I would look forward to seeing what that would be for Wednesday night.
That's great. Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, if I may, I'll work tonight, if not tomorrow morning, to get the language out of the bill that the legislature is considering right now. But sort of broadly from a perspective about how we approach gun violence in this country and in New Mexico and in Santa Fe, I know that we considered a new ordinance change, or was it a resolution? City attorney will correct me, a few weeks ago about placing signage on buildings. There was a lot of discussion at that time about, we should be doing more, we should be doing all the things to try to combat this problem. So this resolution is a way to show that level of support. From some of the data that was included in the memo, we know that the firearm homicide rate in New Mexico from 2014 to 2019, which is the most recent date they have data for, increased 115%. And we know from the data that's being collected that assault weapons, as they're to be defined, have become the weapon of choice for these mass killings across the country. And so I think from the perspective of the mayor who asked that this be introduced, there's just been a push to see that we show the legislators who are advancing this legislation, and we show the governor that this community stands in strong support of doing all that we can to get assault weapons out of the hands of criminals. And at the same time, we know that there was an assault weapons ban in the United States at the federal level that was passed in the 1990s that expired. And we saw a significant increase in the number of deaths by assault weapons as soon as that law went into sunset. And so we have data that shows that these sorts of bans work and they help save lives. And so that's the reason that we're doing it. Thank you, sir.
You have anything else, Counselor?
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, I guess, follow-up in regards to Councillor Lee Garcia's comments around the definition. It's my understanding, I spoke with Senator Cervantes, that he's got concerns because there's not a clear-cut definition in regards to what an assault weapon is, and he's raised concerns around that. So if we do find a definition, I definitely would like to see that on Wednesday. My question is more around process, because when this got introduced last week, it was scheduled to go to the Quality of Life Committee and Finance Committee, and the dates look out of whack because I think because of the prior two instances of when it was pulled and it wasn't assigned to the Public Works and Utilities Committee. And so I'm I guess questioning the process. Why isn't it going to Quality of Life and Finance as recommended when it was introduced last week? Because it's scheduled on today's agenda to go to governing body on Wednesday. And again, I'm just going off of the agenda, that governing body agenda from last week.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, as I'm looking at PrimeGov right now, it looks to me as though the only committee it was assigned to go to actually is Public Works. And I believe the fiscal impact report was 0. So I'm not sure that there's a reason, since it's just a resolution in support of action being taken by the governor and the legislature, that there would be a reason for it to go to the Finance Committee.
Again, City Manager Blair, I'm just going off. I pulled up last week's agenda because I don't, again, when it got introduced, I remember where it was going, and then was a bit surprised to see it come in here. And that's why I looked at the agenda. And in my version of PrimeGov for the governing body meeting, February 22nd, this is item, let's see, 16B, the committee review. I mean, and it's kind of, again, governing body introduction removed from agenda 125-23, governing body introduction 28-23, Quality of Life 215-23, Finance Committee 227-23, governing body 38-23. So a lot of those dates are incorrect except for potentially the last governing body. And again, this is more of a process question. So I guess because the city attorney's here, I'll ask her opinion on how we should move forward with this, given it wasn't necessarily the proposed path when it was introduced. And I guess the whole reason is I want to make sure that there's no, whether it's this or any other legislation, there's no reason to have it be invalid, so to speak.
Chair Rivera, Councilor Garcia, I haven't done the research. It sounds like you have on the introduction referrals. So I'll have to look at that with my staff. I'm not sure what happened, if it was different when we introduced the legislation versus currently, which is what I understand you're saying.
Yeah, correct.
I did just look at what City Manager Blair is looking at for today's agenda just now, but I have not pulled up prior agendas to compare them. So I don't remember what happened at the meeting. It sounds like you're reading from that agenda. So I don't know what happened.
Okay.
So I'll have to look at it.
So I mean, as far as process, I don't know how we move forward, Mr. Chair. I've never, again, never seen this, and I want to make sure we move in the appropriate.
Chair Rivera, Councilor Garcia, I don't think this committee has any really opportunity to change anything right now, other than you can, if you thought this needed to be referred to a particular committee, I guess you could do that. Or if you wanted to discuss it more, that's the type of thing that committees have the opportunity to do. But I don't think you can change the original referrals. So we'll look at what those original referrals were. So
Councilwoman Chavez, did you have
Yeah, I just wanted, Counselor Garcia, I went ahead and looked up the introduction on the agenda from the governing body on February 8th, and it has the same committee timeline that is on, for tonight for that. You look at,
And Chair Rivera, counselors, it's possible that if someone did change the packet, it might have changed it as a unit. So we might need to do research on how that was, if it was changed. If, I don't know what Counselor Garcia, are you looking at a hard copy of something or
I'm
a downloaded PDF or?
I'm just went to Prime Gov
Okay,
and I went to the historical meeting governing body, February 22nd. When I click on HTML packet, it brings it up. And when I go to that agenda item, 16B. I mean, I'm just going off of the information in front of me. And so, again, I want to make sure that the process, we're following the process we have outlined in it, because I know we have our rules. Would that mean waive the rules? Again, this is a process question. This is the introduction that took place last week. And so this is last week's agenda, February 22nd, 2023.
Chair Rivera, counselors, City Manager Blair just pulled up on his computer, this is the introduction, is that correct? Okay, and it does have quality of life on 215 and finance on 227. I don't know why it did, or, if it was, I've not checked those agendas, but it sounds like your understanding is it was not on those agendas?
No,
Can check.
it hasn't gone to any of these. This is the first time this has been before any governing body.
Oh, and Chair Rivera, counselors, we did delay introduction on this one a couple of times, right? So I don't know ultimately, is this the agenda that it was ultimately introduced on? Is this the
Yes.
final
Yes.
that attached there? Okay. Councilors, I don't know what happened. We can look into it. I'm not sure.
So I guess the question is, does it need to go to the two committees that it was assigned to at introduction?
Counselor or Chair Rivera.
Councilor Romero Worth.
I do think we need to do the research, because I do remember that it was delayed because it was on the agenda and then it was delayed. And so the question is, was it the first time it was on the agenda? Was it, did it have a different path than when it was actually done? And when it was actually introduced, and then it was, and I just want to clarify something, City Attorney McSherry, I was under the understanding that a committee can't change the referrals, that you have to, the only place you could change referrals is when it's introduced.
Chair Rivera, counselors, the order cannot be changed, the order of the committees, but the committees do have the opportunity to refer. But if this introduction is correct, this bill should not be in front of this committee. Right, so it's actually not supposed to be on this agenda if this is correct, the one we're looking at that goes to finance and quality of life. It doesn't have public works on it at all. So I think there's some question of should you be discussing it as well. So let us do a little bit of research and come with a recommendation tomorrow. Is that okay? Because I wasn't aware of this issue till this moment. And we're just looking, I mean, this is real time, us looking at this, and it's saying that it shouldn't be on this agenda, but it is.
Right.
So I recommend you don't take action on it, given that it wasn't potentially referred to you. But beyond that, I don't know what to do. So we'll look.
Any other questions? So my guess is that this is coming to us because of the delays and because of the time left during the session. And if it ends up going through all the different committees, it won't make it to the session till the end. But I don't know if that.
Chair Rivera, Council, initially, according to this schedule, it would have already been to the other committees and not to this committee, and it would go to governing body tomorrow or Wednesday.
I see
But if it wasn't introduced until the 22nd, like Counselor Garcia just mentioned,
Okay.
how would it have gone to those other committees first?
And Chair, I think we need to see whether it did and it just got passed on consent. I don't know. I haven't. And maybe it didn't, but I don't think, you know, we don't really know in this moment what it should have done and where it actually has been and what, so
Yeah.
I think they need to look into it.
Yeah.
And Chair Rivera, it could have gone to finance with that schedule after the 22nd,
Okay,
because that was on the 27th. But I don't know if it did. Maybe it did. I'm not sure.
well, we'll heed your recommendation not to take action on this tonight and allow some research to occur.
For Chair Rivera, counselors, you could take action, but just whether it's effective or not, maybe is the question. So if you want to take action, and then we'll just figure out if that makes sense or not, like if it was supposed to be here or not.
Madam Parliamentarian, do you have anything on that?
I think it's the pleasure of the committee.
All right, well,
I'm looking at the finance agenda to see if it was there. But again, there's a whole bunch of questions here. We don't really know where it should have been, where it's been, if anywhere. I don't know.
what are the wishes of the committee? Do you want to move, we can move to table or not table, but I guess move to our next meeting? Or allow staff to do the research on it and then move it through the committee processes it was assigned? Since it wasn't assigned to come here, I feel a little odd taking some action on it. Counselor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it probably should be tabled. I don't, I know that the reason for it being here is to push it along and it's just my thought. Get it to governing body, but it doesn't meet the process. I think people could take issue to that, and I think it'd be smart and wise to look into the reasons why it was moved around and changed.
Is that a motion, Counselor?
Yes, it is.
All right,
Just a point of clarification, the table would just put it later on your agenda.
oh, that's right.
And the original, it seems like regardless of which committees it was supposed to go to, it was scheduled to go to governing body this Wednesday. But beyond that, those just 2 comments.
So then would it appropriate to make a motion to pass it on with no recommendation?
Then it would go to governing body on Wednesday.
And motion to postpone would be the appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, I would think by Wednesday at the latest, we'd be able to have tracked down what has caused the confusion. In real time, the deputy city manager has already sent me the language from the bill that provides a definition of assault weapon. It's too long to read here, but we'll email it out after so you all have that. But I would think we could help provide clarity to Wednesday night. I would advocate we push it along to the next agenda or to the next meeting if you're willing to. If it turns out there's a process issue on Wednesday night that we identify, then that is what it is and you all can take action as appropriate.
I still have some question as to whether we can take action.
Any action. Mr. Chairman, I believe the city manager or the city attorney said you can take action. The question is whether it's effectual or not in terms of moving something forward. So between now and Wednesday night, options could be total mistake. It's off the agenda for Wednesday night. We'll reroute and have it done clearly. It could be there was a computer error, but the rest of the paperwork says otherwise. We're going to move forward. All those options I think are on the table and everything in between that. So it could be. And so if you voted to move forward, and it turns out that you didn't have authority to do it, we would just remove it from the agenda from Wednesday night.
Councilwoman Chavez.
I just have a question, and I might be completely wrong, but with the confusion and the errors, wouldn't this be something that staff would remove from the agenda? Because it's not being, like, it doesn't seem ready for us to take action on because of their, like, it doesn't even have listed in front of us the governing body where it was actually discussed. So there's just like multiple errors. Typically, I've seen, or maybe I'm making it up or imagining it, that when there's these type of errors, items are removed by the staff because of it, or when an item's not ready to be reviewed, staff removes it until all accurate information is available for us to actually make a decision. It seems like we don't have what we need to make a decision either way. And in that case, I would imagine the agenda would have to be amended due to staff communication. But that's just what makes sense to me.
Chair Rivera, counselors, we will make a recommendation on Wednesday. We can't literally take it off the agenda at this point. It's less than 72 hours, but we can make a change when we're approving the agenda during Wednesday's meeting. Sounds like no matter what, we're going to have to make some sort of announcement as to what the findings were. And it is currently listed on the agenda for Wednesday, is my understanding. It should be based on what we're seeing here.
Counselor Lee Garcia, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And but that to me sounds like it still didn't meet the process, even if it gets to the governing body on Wednesday. And so I think that's the dilemma, and we really can't take action on this tonight. Unless we want to bypass the rules.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yeah, I don't think we're bypassing the rules. I think we're saying if we took action on it, the action would just be subject to whether, you know, they'll pull it off, right?
Chair Rivera, I think it would be subject to whether was the referral actually to this committee. If
Yeah.
there was no referral, then it probably just won't have any impact, whatever action you take.
Yeah, then the action would just be null.
Right. You just didn't have the authority. It shouldn't have been on the agenda in the first place.
And so it won't be allowed to be heard at the governing body meeting because it shouldn't have been in front of this committee. If we were to approve it, that means it can't go to the governing body, so it has to be taken off the agenda anyway.
Chair Rivera, Councilor Romero Worth, I think that depends if it went to finance and was approved on consent.
Yeah, I don't see it on the
Okay, it
finance
was not. Okay,
agenda.
we resolved that.
From the 27th, which I believe that was the last finance meeting. So the problem is we just don't have enough information, but if it's here and it shouldn't be, then whatever we do here won't matter because it shouldn't have been here and it won't be allowed to be heard at.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I think what led us to this situation in the first place might be the way out, which was on the 21st of January, when we elected not to introduce the bill, a recommendation was made by staff to amend the agenda to remove it from the agenda. And I would think that would be the case here as well. If it turned out we had not followed the process, we would make a recommendation complying with the 72-hour Open Meetings Act law that says outside of whatever bills you all pull from consent to be heard separately, staff would make a recommendation that it be pulled from the agenda. And you vote yea or nay at that point.
And Chair Rivera, Councilor, the other opportunity you could have is if you wanted to waive the rules, that takes a 2/3 vote. If you wanted to still discuss it on the agenda Wednesday before the end of the session, because I think the session will be over before the next governing body meeting, because we have 5 Wednesdays this month. So there's a 2-week break in between council meetings. But that's not something that the committees can do. That would be, because that's the governing body rule. And so that would have to be waived by the governing body if you wanted to do that. But it's not something we can decide right now.
Yeah, the session ends March 18th.
Ms. McSherry, could we move it forward without a recommendation and give direction to research some of what we've been talking about tonight?
Chair Rivera, you can definitely move it forward with our recommendation, assuming that it's actually been referred to this committee, and that's, and then I think we're happy to do that research.
If we did that, then, and you did your research and found out that this was okay and our recommendation was good, then we would take a vote on it Wednesday night. But if your research proved that it needed to go through the committee process, then our recommendation to move it forward would be null and void.
Councilor Rivera, I think then the governing body would be faced with whether or not, yes, it needs to go back to committees and whether or not that makes sense still for that to happen. Or if you want to waive your rules about committee referral and vote on it on Wednesday night. That takes a 2/3 vote, a super majority to waive rules, similar to extending past 11:30.
Counselor Garcia, do you wanna?
I think I just, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think either way, it's probably gonna end up in the same outcome. So it really almost doesn't matter what we do here at this body.
Does anyone wanna make a motion?
Yes. It does, though, if there was a motion to postpone till our next meeting for clarification on, are we the eligible committee for this? I mean, it obviously then wouldn't meet the deadline before the end of the session. But there's that path as well.
What are the wishes of this committee? Anyone? No?
I'll make a motion to move forward with no recommendation, and then whenever we hear on Wednesday, I guess we'll get an update then.
Second.
Motion to move forward without a recommendation and allow staff to do some additional work on this. Any further discussion? All those we better take a voice vote on this.
Counselor Amanda Chavez.
Yeah.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
No,
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Chairman Rivera.
Yes. The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Split. Ms. McSherry, thank you. We're on to our action items. Item 7A. Do you want to read that into the record? Mr. Roach?
Item 7A, consideration of resolution number 2023 blank, Counselor Romero Worth, Councilwoman Villarreal, Counselor Chavez, Counselor Rivera, Counselor Cassett, Counselor Michael Garcia, and Mayor Weber. A resolution directing the city manager to take next steps based on some of the recommendations of the chart report. Aaron McSherry, City Attorney.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval and a second. Do we have any discussion? Counselor Lee Garcia.
thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to really ask questions about the resolution. I was out sick for quality of life, and so wanted to state for the record that I appreciate the work that has been done to at least get a start, a resolution, a decision going forward to do something. And I think that's what the community has been looking for quite a long time now. My initial inclination was to sign on to the resolution because I really felt like it's something that I wanted to get behind and to see how we can really come to a consensus on what goes, in the center of our plaza. And so on that note, I wanted to thank the counselors and Councilwoman Villarreal for being at the meeting tonight as well, because I know you're not in Public Works, but you came here to answer any questions that I may have and others. And so I think I've been asking this question for quite some time, is our right to rebuild this monument. Is it in our purview as the city to take over the rebuilding of the Soldiers Monument? And I think that went back to the question about ownership. Attorney McSherry, I believe you've given that answer before. I believe you did state that it was owned by the city. Is that correct?
Chair Rivera, Counselor Garcia, the best information that we have is that it's owned by the city. Ownership is dictated by deeds and transfers of property rights and that kind of thing. And the only document that we have related to that is the US patent from 1901 related to the entire plaza.
Thank you. So I guess moving forward with the resolution to direct the city manager to next steps to get this thing rebuilt would be allowable and it's in our right to do so.
Chair Rivera, Counselor Garcia, that's the best information that I've been able to find. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question about why did we include both the rebuilding of the monument and the Office of Equity and Inclusion built into one direction? And I just kind of wanted to get the thoughts on those that worked on this resolution, obviously collaboratively, because they're two big pieces, and obviously come with both a price tag. I think building the Soldiers Monument is going to take quite a bit of process, and also putting together an Office of Equity and Inclusion. And so my question is to why were they put together into one resolution and not worked on separately?
I can take a stab at that, Mr. Chair. And we have all four of the original sponsors here. So, sure, if I miss something, they'll chime in. I think after as we've said, after the chart report was issued, we started to meet about how to move forward as a city with those recommendations. And as you mentioned, I think people would like us to do something about the obelisk in the center of the plaza. And so that was certainly some urgency. I think as we talked, it was clear that this work needed a place to land so that it could be consistently and continually worked on. And the best way to do that, we thought, was to take up one of the recommendations which is to create an Office of Equity and Inclusion. And it also worked out rather well because, well, let me just go back. I think, a lot of what is recommended in that report can't be done quickly. We'll need a continual effort. And so we need a space in city government to do that work. But then in addition, as we started talking about what to do with the obelisk, there are things that are going to require more work and a place for that work to land. And so having the Office of Equity and Inclusion set up and ready to work on not only the chart report, but the things that need to happen in order to reframe and rebuild the obelisk, it's required. So they sort of go together, I guess. And I don't know if my colleagues want to add to that.
I think that was a great explanation, Councilor Romero. Councilor Garcia, you still have the floor.
Thank you for that. And I know that a lot of probably direction that might be taken here has come from the recommendations, some of the recommendations of the chart report. And while I think that is something that is valuable to look to for the future, I just continue to hear from people in the community that are just want the Soldiers Monument back. And I have, in its original form, its original shape. Obviously there's many people who talk about the controversial plaque and that one seems to be more a little bit more divisive within some of the people that I talked to or have talked to me about. Whereas some would keep it the same and pay tribute to the reasons why Savage was chiseled out. I mean, there's many people who've spoken to me that just, want it back its original form. The Soldiers Monument obelisk has been in the center of the plaza since the 1800s. And so I hear from people, obviously even listening to some comments at the H board as to, will they have an opportunity to take a look at that because it is in the historic district. It is a piece of our history of the city of Santa Fe that although controversial, depending on how you take a look at our history is not pretty. But taking a look at how this monument will be reconstructed, I think in the resolution it calls for piecing the getting the pieces that are salvageable and trying to put them back together. Was it an attempt to look at the pieces and maybe get an opinion as to if it's even possible to do?
Do you want to?
Sure, unless you want to.
Well, I think, we've had this discussion many times, and I think looking initially to see if it can even be done is going to be a big question. So, we need to get people that can take a look at it, look at the pieces themselves, see if there's anything that can bind them together, what that material is, and, even if it's going to be a possibility to do. So that would be the first steps in it.
And if I can just add to that, Mr. Chair and Councillor Lee Garcia, the resolution, and I have it in front of me so I can read to you the words. It does say that we are asking the city manager to hire conservators, designers, and/or historians to determine specific proposals to mend, redesign, and/or reframe the obelisk, maintaining the general shape as it had prior to its destruction. And then it goes on to say, using original pieces to show the lines where the obelisk fractured by bonding it together with a modern contrasting material that delineates the fractured lines caused by the toppling of the obelisk on October 14th, 2020. And and then later it does suggest that those designs will come back to the governing body and that we will approve one, or maybe there are more, depending on, what they find in terms of what it takes to bond it together and how that works. So I think, this just kind of sets in motion what are the possibilities. We have not seen it. Really, I personally did not want to see it. And I'm not a conservator or a designer, so I don't feel like I have the expertise to know whether it can be put back together or how you would do that. But there are people out there in the world, I think, who will be able to advise us and will be able to bring us a redesign that mends it and redesigns it and reframes it.
Thank you. It's a big task to probably try to reconstruct something that was damaged in the manner that this was damaged. I've had a call from constituents saying that we should try to get local queries and pull materials from local queries and try to build this back in the similar manner as it was, because again, it's a historical part of our plaza. Can't really change the benches without going to the historical board, and I think that's part of this process. I feel that not taking away from the work that's been done, but would it be in our purview to possibly when proposals are done that this I'm assuming a building permit would have to be pulled for the reconstruction of this. Would that be true to say?
Chair Rivera, Councilor Garcia, I think that's accurate.
And that being said, would there be a process in regards to going to the H board, meeting all the planning and zoning rules that would be required by the city, and then continuing on through the planning commission, and then obviously to the city for an approval of what this obelisk will end up being.
Chair Rivera, Councilor Garcia, if it were a different type of structure, then the H board would have jurisdiction. I'm not sure planning commission would, but because it is what is called an object under our definitions in chapter 14, objects are excluded from H board jurisdiction expressly. So the governing body could look at its code and decide if you wanted to change something about that. But right now, objects, which are things like sculptures, there's a whole list actually in the resolution itself of the types of things that are excluded. Just had that up, 1 second. It was certainly a question as to what their jurisdiction would be. But the definition of object, maybe I'll just pull that up. Includes things like arts and so as used in 14-5.2, which is the historic district section of the code, object means the term used to distinguish from structures, those constructions that are primarily artistic in nature or are relatively small in scale and simply constructed. For example, sculpture, monuments, boundary markers, statuary, and fountains. And so our historic code excludes those types of things from the jurisdiction of the Historic District Review Board.
Could it be in the ability of this body to recommend that it does go to a review to the historic board? Question.
Chair Rivera, councilors, I think we'd have to look at that. In order to give them authority, I think you probably would need to amend your code. So it just depends on what you were asking them to do.
Okay, I just, wrapping my head around the whole historic district and how when changes are made, especially when it comes to building codes and walls and structures and things, and when they don't meet that, I know it's building the Soldiers Monument or the rebuilding of the obelisk is definitely going to be something that will change the landscape of that. Well, it has changed the landscape of our plaza. And I think there are so many in our community that want to make sure that it does go back in a manner that it still represents their history. And those are just some of my concerns. So I would at some point like to see that it would go to at least a review of the historic board to see if this is something that is going to meet the standards of what it was. I'll move on to my next question. I think when we talked about the cost of reconstructing the monument, and in the fiscal report, are we looking at, is it a projection of 250,000 per year? Operating, the way I'm looking at this. I mean, what do we expect to spend on this, on the complete reconstruction of the Soldiers Monument once it's done?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lee Garcia, I don't know that we know that for sure yet until we know what material will be used to bond it together, till we know the cost of that material, till we know what kind of material the plaques will be made of, how much it costs. I think, this FIR was prepared by staff it's basically an estimate, but until we have the actual design for how to rebuild, amend, and reframe it, there's a lot of unknowns. And yeah, and we need to hire the necessary expertise to advise us on how to do that.
Looking at the fiscal report, so we're looking at about 1,659,682 as a 3-year total cost projected. And that's that would be total, including rebuilding the monument and Office of Equity and Inclusion.
That is what the FIR says. Again, that the FIR was prepared by staff. I think in the narrative, it does provide some assumptions that were made. I think, you know, in improving the resolution, we are not approving this dollar amount. What the resolution specifically directs is that the city manager bring forward a recommendation, an initial recommendation for what it would cost to create the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And, you know, I think that's going to depend on the budget hearings, how much money the city has available, given other priorities to stand this office up. Given the financial situation we will be reviewing next month. And I guess the other thing I would say is in Albuquerque, they have quite a large Office of Equity and Inclusion with quite a few staff people. And part of the reason they have the size that they do is that they have funding from the foundation world. And I think there probably is money out there to do this kind of work, given the times we're in. And I would hope that as this office is established, we will look for opportunities to fund it with not just city dollars, but with foundation and charitable donations. So, well, maybe not charitable donations, but it could be, you know, there might be some. Actually, I think I did get an email from somebody who said they wanted to make wanted to contribute money to make this. I'll have to go back and look at that. I just remembered that. Well, I can't remember if it was for the obelisk or for the Office of Equity and Inclusion, but I do think there's a lot of money out there for this kind of work, and we'll have to see what the budget proposal looks like. This is just a you know, staff idea of one way you could do it. But again, I think we'll continue to have conversations about what actually happens when the city manager brings forward a proposal as part of the FY24 budget.
Thank you. Follow up on that. I think you mentioned Albuquerque has an Office of Equity and Inclusion that was put together. I did hear some comments at the previous committee meeting that it didn't seem to be performing very well. I don't know where that information came from. But how do we qualify, you know, what the impact of this type of an office is? You know, are there any kind of recommendations to have metrics put forth that kind of see how, I mean, it's really hard to qualify how well an office like this works until you try it. And so, you know, is it going to stop any further damage to other monuments and statues and structures and things in our city? I don't know. I would hope so. I think that should be the direction to preserve our city in any way that we can, you know, however controversial it can be. And I really feel that preserving as much of our city as that we can, it just shows that we are preserving our historic city. And changes, you know, I've always said change is not an optional event in society. I mean, change happens. We have to adapt. But I don't feel that sometimes what has pushed and sparked this change for sure was something that came out of sheer animosity. And I don't, you know, I don't condone that type of behavior. You know, people have the right to protest, but they don't have the right to break the law. And I think that's what really started this conversation. And anyone who had a part in that, I have a hard time taking that into my own thought process, because if you want something changed, bring it and discuss it, and bring the right stakeholders to the table that are going to have the opportunity to give their heartfelt opinions as to what should be done. In this case, and I'm going more into comment than I am into questions, because I've read through the resolution. I've listened to many constituents, and aside from the people who will come and try to say, you build it, we're going to demolish it again. I mean, I take that to heart, and I don't, it really, really bothers me, because we try and we strive to provide to promote a peaceful society, and when there's that type of animosity, I think there's no room for that. And so, where does it end? And I'm hoping that once, whatever happens with this Soldiers Monument, I have my own ideas as to what I feel should be done in regards to building it back the same way that it was, and addressing the controversial plaque that was there. And so, yeah, so that's just where I'm having trouble with this resolution. Again, I appreciate the work that's been done on it, but I think there's a very large part of our community that feels on the contrary. And I think that if you were to take this to an actual vote to the people, and I know I mentioned that before, I'm not saying that that's what needs to be done, but if you really took it down to the people, I think they would say, put it back the same way that it was. And there will be some that don't say that, but I'm listening to the majority. And then how do you try to mend the division between the two? That's the hardest part, and I think that's the key element to this whole resolution and to the whole process. I don't necessarily feel, again, that the chart process gave us a clear direction as to what to do here. I think that we as people can come up with that, but I'll yield the floor for now. My thought process on this is that I kind of have an issue with the cost of putting together both the office of equity and inclusion, including the building of the Soldiers Monument, into one resolution. And I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions? See none? All right, we have a motion on the floor with a second. No further discussion. Yeah, let's do a roll call vote.
Counselor Amanda Chavez. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Abstain.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
And Chairman Rivera.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Thank you, Ms. McSherry, for being here tonight. Next is, I believe, introduction of legislation. Councilor Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight I am introducing, let's see, the caption reads, it's a long one, bear with me. A bill amending the election and political campaign codes, sections 1 through 3 of Chapter 9, 1987 SFCC, updating definitions and responsibilities consistent with state law, creating a single section of common definitions for the campaign code and the public campaign finance code, removing section 9-2.4 regarding a candidate written acknowledgement of familiarity with campaign code, removing the requirement in section 9-2.5 to post a phone number on campaign materials, amending 9-2.6 to incorporate the previously amended definition of independent expenditure, amending section 9-2.7 to remove the requirement to identify a specific candidate or ballot question in political committee disclosures, updating the finance reporting schedule in section 9-2.10, expressly permitting electronic contributions in section 9-3.12, and replacing all references to participating candidate, I think there's a typo there, with publicly financed candidate. And this is, I would call, let's see, the memo characterizes it as an effort to closely align with the state local election code and help make the election code more readable and get it in line with state law. So this will be making its way for discussion in the committee process. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. No executive session, matters from staff. Director Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. No matters from staff, from Public Works Department.
Roach.
No matters from staff from Public Utilities. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the committee. See none. No matters from the chair, except our next meeting is Monday, March 27th. With that, we adjourn, and again, wanted to thank Councilwoman Villarreal for being here, and Councilwoman Cassett. I think she's probably gone, but wanted to thank her for being here as well. So thank you all.